She thought the worst day of her life was the one she signed her divorce papers. She was wrong. When Paige Blake walked into a dim Manhattan bar and caught her ex-husband with the woman who'd helped destroy their marriage, her heart didn't just break, it snapped. In a single, reckless heartbeat, she grabbed the most powerful-looking stranger in the room and kissed him senseless right in front of her ex. She walked out feeling vindicated. What she didn't know, what would change everything, was that the stranger she'd just used as revenge was her new billionaire boss. Now let's begin. The Onyx bar was designed to impress. Onyx counters glowing amber from beneath, wines arranged like jewels, jazz sliding through the air like silk. But tonight, the place felt like a hunting ground, and Paige Blake was very clearly the prey. Her phone buzzed in her palm. He's here, and he's not alone. Don't do anything crazy. Her best friend Lily's warning made her chest tighten. Paige swallowed hard, pushing her shoulders back as she stepped fully inside. She wasn't even sure why she'd come. Curiosity, masochism, or the stupid hope that maybe, just maybe, her friend was wrong. She wasn't. In the back corner, half hidden by a velvet booth, sat Charles Davies, her ex-husband. His laugh rolled smoothly over the music. His hand rested on the thigh of a brunette in a fitted red dress. The same woman from his office, the one he'd sworn again and again had nothing to do with their divorce. The woman leaned in, her fingers threading through Charles's hair as if she owned him. His eyes glowed with a familiar charm, the one he used on judges, clients, and, once upon a time, on Paige. The sight hit her like a physical blow. Her lungs forgot how to work. The bar, the music, the low hum of conversation, all of it blurred at the edges. For a second she stood frozen, one hand clenched around her phone, the other hanging uselessly at her side. He really did it. She'd suspected for months before the divorce. Late nights at the office, forgotten anniversaries. The way he spoke about ambition and outgrowing things, like their marriage was an old suit he'd outlived. But catching him now, so brazenly, laughing with the woman he'd chosen over her, something inside her cracked. Paige made herself move, one heel in front of the other, slicing through the bar's warm haze. When she reached the table, Charles looked up, expecting a server, a friend, anyone but the woman he'd once promised forever. His smile faltered. "Paige?" The brunette's spine stiffened. She tried to subtly pull her hand from his leg. Too late. "Don't stop on my account," Paige said. Her voice sounded weirdly calm in her own ears. "You were just about to prove my therapist right." Charles shot to his feet, irritation flashing across his face. "What are you doing here?" She lifted a brow. "Last I checked, this bar isn't your private club, Charles." The brunette cleared her throat. Maybe I should—" "No," Charles snapped, then pasted on a smooth smile. "Sit, it's fine." He turned back to Paige, the smile curdling. "Look, we're divorced. You can't just storm in and—" "Storm in." The laugh that left her mouth surprised even her. It was brittle, sharp. "I didn't storm anywhere. I walked, calmly, while watching my ex-husband prove exactly why our marriage fell apart." His jaw tightened. "We are not doing this scene here." "There it is," Paige murmured. "The famous Charles Davies image management. God forbid anyone see you as a cheating coward." His eyes turned flinty. "We wanted different things, Paige. You wanted comfort, a nice little life, designs and coffee shops. I want more. I need someone who understands that. Someone exciting." He placed a casual hand on the brunette's shoulder as if she were a luxury item he'd just purchased. Heat climbed up Paige's throat, but it wasn't embarrassment anymore. It was rage, boiling, bright and reckless. "Exciting," she echoed. "Is that what we're calling betrayal now?" Every word from his mouth was a deliberate cut. "We grew apart. You know this. Don't be melodramatic." His gaze flicked past her, already bored. "Go home, Paige. Don't make a fool of yourself." The humiliation landed like a slap. Not just the cheating, not just the divorce, but the dismissal, as though 3 years of marriage had been a mildly inconvenient subscription he'd cancelled. Her fingers trembled at her side. She could walk away, go home, cry into a pillow and send Lily 27 voice notes until there was nothing left in her throat. Or she could leave a mark, a scar on that perfect ego he polished like a trophy. Paige's gaze swept the bar. Lawyers, bankers, tech bros in expensive watches, a sea of tailored suits and curated smiles. Then her eyes snagged on him. He sat alone at the bar, one hand cradling a lowball glass, the other resting relaxed on the counter. Dark hair, close-cropped, a jaw drawn in clean lines. His charcoal suit fit him like it had been sewn directly onto his body, understated but obscenely expensive. He didn't fidget with his phone. He didn't scan the room for attention. He owned his space without saying a word. Power radiated from him, not loud, not flashy. Controlled, dangerous, perfect. Before she could overthink it, Paige turned her back on Charles. Her heels clicked a staccato warning as she marched toward the stranger. Each step steadied her anger into something focused. The man looked up when her shadow fell across his drink. His eyes were an unreadable storm grey, cool and assessing, taking her in with one swift, sharp sweep. Surprise flickered there, quickly buried under composure. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice low and smooth as the jazz humming behind them. "Yes," Paige said, more to herself than to him. She fisted her hand in the lapel of his suit, tugged and pressed her mouth to his. The world narrowed to the point where their lips met. Her heart slammed. Heat shot through her veins, fueled by anger and heartbreak and raw adrenaline. She poured all of it into the kiss, every sleepless night, every gaslighted argument, every time she'd wondered if she wasn't enough. For a split second, the stranger went still, his body rigid with shock. Then his hand slid to the small of her back. His fingers were warm, firm, and he pulled her closer with a controlled strength that stole the breath from her lungs. He didn't deepen the kiss so much as steady it, like he was taking something wild and reckless and holding it in place. Possessive, dangerous, electric. Paige broke away first, chest heaving, her lips tingled. She kept her eyes on his tie knot, anywhere but those grey eyes, because if she saw judgment there, she might crumble. "Thank you," she managed. "You're welcome," he said, voice a notch lower. She could feel his gaze on her like a hand at the back of her neck. She turned then, fast, her pulse roaring in her ears. Charles stared at her, mouth parted, colour drained from his face. The brunette blinked rapidly, looking between Paige and the stranger like she was watching a live grenade go off. "Turns out, Charles," Paige said, letting her voice carry just enough to reach their table, "I was looking for something more exciting too." For the first time that night, Charles had no comeback. Paige didn't wait for one. She spun on her heel and walked straight out of the Onyx, head high, heart pounding. The night air hit her lungs like ice, but she just kept walking, one hand pressed to her still tingling mouth. She had no idea she'd just detonated something much bigger than her ex-husband's ego. She had kissed a stranger, and that stranger, Christopher Harrington, had already bought the company where she worked. Monday morning came with a hangover of regret, despite the fact that Paige hadn't had nearly enough alcohol to warrant one. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, dabbing concealer under her eyes. Sleep had been a joke. Every time she'd closed her lids, she'd felt his hand at her back, the cool brush of an expensive suit under her fingers, the way he'd steadied her like he had every right to. "Idiot," she muttered at her reflection. "World-class idiot." Her phone, sitting on the sink, buzzed again. A text from Lily. "How are you holding up?" Also, "Was the guy at least hot?" Paige stared at the message, then let out a short, humorless laugh. Hot was such a small word for what that stranger had been. Intense, stunning, intimidating, The kind of man who probably owned a private jet and frightened waiters without trying. She typed back, "I'll debrief you at lunch, if I survive until lunch." Innovate Design Studio occupied the 12th floor of a glass tower in Midtown. Usually the place buzzed with energy. Designers arguing about color palettes, interns wrestling with foam boards, the smell of burnt coffee and marker pens. It was chaotic and familiar, Paige's sanctuary. This morning the atmosphere felt wrong. She'd barely reached her desk when a ping echoed from her computer. Every screen around her lit up almost simultaneously. "Uh-oh," Leo, her deskmate, murmured. "Company-wide email with all caps in the subject line. That's never good." Paige clicked. Subject, "Emergency all-hands meeting. Do not miss effective immediately. Innovate Design Studio has been acquired by Harrington Media Group. All employees are required to attend a town hall meeting at 11 a.m. in the main conference hall to welcome our new leadership." "Harrington Media," Leo whistled. "As in Harrington, the billionaire." "That's big," Paige said, reading the line again as if it might change. Harrington Media Group owned half the streaming platforms she binge-watched and a terrifying number of news outlets. They were the sharks. Innovate was a colourful little fish. "Guess we work for a billionaire now," Leo said. "Think he'll let us keep the coffee machine?" Paige forced a smile. "We can only hope." But a cold thread of unease wound through her chest. Acquisitions meant restructuring. Restructuring meant layoffs. She'd worked too hard to build her portfolio to lose it all because some billionaire wanted a tax write-off. The hours until 11 crawled. By the time they were herded into the main conference hall, an open-plan space cleared of desks and lined with folding chairs, Paige's stomach was knotted tight. Designers, account managers, admin staff, everyone packed in shoulder to shoulder, eyes flicking nervously to the front. Mr. Everett, their current CEO, stood near the stage looking oddly small without his usual confident swagger. Next to him, the HR director clutched a stack of papers like a lifeline. Paige slid into a seat between Leo and Lily, who'd slipped in from another department. "This looks ominous," Lily whispered. "Understatement," Paige muttered. At 11 mass on the dot, the HR director stepped up to the microphone. "Good morning, everyone," he began. His voice wobbled. "As you've read, Innovate Design Studio is now proud to be part of Harrington Media Group." Proud, Paige thought. Sure. "It is my honor," HR continued, "to introduce the visionary leader who will guide us into this new chapter. Please welcome the CEO of Harrington Media Group, Mr. Christopher Haar." The rest of the name dissolved in the roar rushing in Paige's ears. A man walked onto the small stage. He wore a dark suit, crisp white shirt, no tie. The cut was perfect, the sort of tailored elegance that made everyone else's clothes look off the rack. Broad shoulders, unhurried stride, an aura that shifted the room's center of gravity toward him. Dark hair, controlled posture, storm-grey eyes. The world tilted. No, it couldn't be. But when his gaze swept the crowd, cool, precise, evaluating, and then snagged on hers, the truth slammed into her like a truck. It was him, the stranger from the bar, the man she had grabbed and kissed simply because he looked like he owned the room. Of course he'd owned the room. He'd owned the company. Paige's fingers went numb around the notepad in her lap. Heat climbed up her neck. If there were a hole in the floor anywhere, she would have gladly thrown herself into it. Christopher Harrington's expression didn't change exactly. It remained composed, almost impassive, but in his eyes something flickered, a flash of sharp recognition, followed by something infuriatingly close to amusement. "Oh my God," Lily breathed beside her. "He's unreal. Does money come with a jawline now?" Paige barely heard her. Her heart was beating high in her throat. Christopher took the mic, voice ringing easily across the room. "Good morning," he said. No notes, no slides. I know acquisitions can be unsettling. Change often is. But Harrington Media didn't buy Innovate to dismantle it. We acquired you because we see value here. Talent, potential, creative energy we want to amplify, not erase. His speech was polished, perfectly pitched. He talked about integration, resources, global reach. Every sentence filled with the kind of corporate language that should have sounded cold. Coming from him, it felt like a warning wrapped in velvet. Paige barely absorbed the words. All she could think was, he knows, he remembers, and now he's my boss. When the applause finally died and people started to rise, the room buzzed with speculation. Do you think we'll get health benefits that actually benefit us now? Leo joked weakly. Do you think he's single? Someone behind them whispered. Focus, Paige muttered, shoving her notepad into her bag, desperate to escape. She didn't make it. As the crowd shifted, a hush rolled through the hall like ripples spreading in water. Conversations dimmed. Heads turned. Christopher was stepping off the small stage, flanked by Mr. Everett and the HR director. But instead of moving toward the cluster of senior staff waiting by the door, he walked straight into the middle of the crowd, straight toward her. Keep walking, Paige told herself. Blend. Be wallpaper. But people were parting for him instinctively, like he wore an invisible force field. Within seconds, there was a small cleared space, and she stood right in the middle of it. He stopped in front of her. Up close, he was even more unnerving. The lines at the corners of his eyes suggested he was a little older than she'd first thought. Late 30s, maybe. His gaze, level and unwavering, pinned her in place. Miss Blake, isn't it? He said, voice low but carrying. Her stomach dropped. He knew her name. Yes, she managed. Paige Blake. Good. Something like a smile tugged at one corner of his mouth, but didn't reach his eyes. I was reading through your file this morning. Your work is interesting. Interesting. That could mean anything from impressive to fire her first. He extended his hand. The gesture looked polite. It didn't feel polite. It felt like a command. Paige placed her palm against his. His grip was firm, warm, holding her a fraction of a second longer than strictly necessary. It yanked an involuntary flash of memory to the surface, his hand at her back, pulling her closer at the bar. Her pulse jumped. I'd like to see you in my office in 10 minutes, he said. Top floor. We have some things to discuss about your future here. His tone was mild. The implication was not. He released her hand and turned away, already addressing someone else, seamlessly folding himself back into CEO mode. The noise of the room surged back like someone had turned up the volume. Leo leaned close. What did you do? Paige swallowed, staring after Christopher's retreating figure. Apparently, she said faintly, I kissed my new boss before I knew he was my boss. Lily choked on a laugh. Of course you did. 10 minutes later, with her heart trying to claw its way out of her chest, Paige stepped into the elevator that would take her to the top floor, and into the office of the billionaire she'd used as revenge. The top floor of the building didn't look like it belonged to the same company, where the 12th floor was open and cluttered. Mood boards, sample walls, the occasional beanbag. The executive level was all controlled lines and hushed luxury. Thick carpet swallowed her footsteps. Abstract art hung on pristine walls. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and something crisp and expensive. A receptionist at a sleek white desk glanced up. You must be Ms. Blake. Mr. Harrington is expecting you. Of course he was. Thank you, Paige said, forcing her voice not to wobble. Straight through, the receptionist gestured. Last office on the right. The door was tall, dark wood, the kind that made everyone on the other side feel smaller. Paige wiped her palms on her skirt, then knocked. Come in, came the reply. Calm, controlled. She pushed the door open. The office was huge. Floor-to-ceiling glass on one side offered a sweeping view of the city, skyscrapers slicing into a pale winter sky. The rest of the room was minimalist, a large black desk, a few leather chairs, built-in shelves with neatly arranged books and a handful of personal items. Christopher Harrington stood near the window, hands in his pockets, looking out over the city like it was a map only he knew how to read. "Ms. Blake," he said without turning, "close the door." The click of the latch sounded unnervingly final. He turned then, and for a fraction of a second the mask slipped. She saw the man from the bar, not the CEO, not the billionaire, just the stranger whose mouth had been under hers. Surprise, curiosity, something sharper. Then it was gone, replaced by cool professionalism. "What a memorable introduction we had," he said, walking toward his desk. Paige's cheeks flamed. "About that," she started. "Mr. Harrington, I owe you an apology. I didn't know who you were. It was a mistake," he cut in. "Yes," she blurted. "I was upset. I'd just seen my ex-husband, and I reacted like a crazy person. It won't happen again. I understand completely if you—" He raised a hand, and the words died in her throat. "Let's not insult either of our intelligences, Miss Blake," he said mildly. "What you did was impulsive, certainly, but not meaningless." He moved behind his desk but didn't sit, bracing his hands on the surface instead. "You saw an adversary. You chose the most powerful-looking man in the room and used him as a weapon. It was a rather efficient way to wound your ex-husband's pride." Paige swallowed. He wasn't wrong. That stung more than if he'd simply called her unhinged. "I'm not proud of it," she said quietly. His gaze sharpened. "No, but you're not sorry either." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Honesty seemed safer than pretending to be something she wasn't. "Not entirely," she admitted. He deserved at least one moment of humiliation. Something like approval flickered in Christopher's eyes, gone as quickly as it came. "Regardless," he said, straightening, "we have a practical problem." Here it was. The part where she was fired so fast, her security badge melted. "I understand," she said, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "If you want me to hand in my resignation—" He blinked. "Resignation? Why on earth would I waste talent like yours over a kiss?" That was not the script she'd expected. She floundered. "I assumed you wouldn't want someone so unprofessional, representing your company." He tilted his head, studying her. "What you did was reckless. It showed a lack of control." He paused. "It also showed initiative, decisiveness under emotional strain, and a willingness to take bold action to protect yourself. I don't have much use for timid people in my organization, Ms. Blake." So was he complimenting her? "I read your portfolio this morning," he continued. "Your work is sharp. You understand brand narrative in a way most junior designers don't. You're wasted where you are." Shock flared through her. "Wasted?" His mouth curved just a little. "Let me rephrase. You're underutilized. And after what happened at the bar, it would be unwise to let you remain in a position where your temper can create problems I don't directly control." And there it was, the catch. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Paige asked carefully. "I'm not suggesting anything." He walked around the desk, closing the distance between them until he was only a few feet away. "I'm informing you of a change." Her heartbeat spiked. "Effective immediately," he said. "Your role as junior designer in the general pool is dissolved." A lump formed in her throat. It sounded awfully like the first part of a termination sentence. "In its place," he went on, "you will assume the position of personal design liaison to the CEO." Paige stared. "I'm sorry. The what?" His eyes glinted. "You'll report directly and only to me. You'll handle all high-priority design projects I designate. You'll coordinate with external agencies when necessary and oversee internal execution. Your desk will be moved to the anteroom outside this office." He might as well have said, "I am moving you into my shadow." She swallowed. "That sounds like a promotion." "It is," he said, "and a test." Her mind raced. Working directly under a billionaire CEO would fast-track her career or destroy it. Her friends downstairs would assume she'd slept her way upward, especially once they learned about the bar incident. The gossip would be brutal. "Why me?" she asked before she could stop herself. He considered her for a moment, eyes unreadable. "Because you're talented. Because you're not afraid to challenge people more powerful than you. And because after Friday night, I'd be a fool not to keep a closer eye on you." "So this is about control," she said, the words slipping out. "Everything is about control," he replied without missing a beat. "Especially in my world." He stepped back, giving her space to breathe. "There will be people who assume this promotion has nothing to do with your work, that it's about what happened at the bar." Paige's cheeks burned. "They'd be wrong." "Yes," he said, "they would. But people don't need to be right to be dangerous." Her throat tightened. "Then maybe you shouldn't do this." "On the contrary," he said. "Your reputation already has a problem whether you accept this or not. At least this way, I can make sure your work is visible enough to drown out the noise." It was a trap, a gilded one, but a trap nonetheless. Stay where she was and risk being quietly cut in a restructuring. Take the promotion and risk becoming office gossip's favorite topic. "And if I say no?" she asked. He smiled, a slow tilt of his lips that was not comforting. "You won't." Anger flared, cutting through her fear. "You don't get to decide that." "Oh, I assure you," he said softly, "I don't decide your choices. I merely structure your options. You can remain in your current role and wait for Harrington Media's integration team to review redundancies. Or you can take the position I'm offering, increase your visibility, and put yourself in a place where your talent might actually be recognized." She stared at him, chest tight. The message beneath his calm words was clear. Stay below and risk being expendable. Come up here and at least have a fighting chance. "Why do I get the feeling you're very used to people saying yes to you?" she muttered. "Efficiency is one of my strengths," he said dryly. "So is identifying assets worth the effort to retain." Assets. That's what she was to him, not the woman who'd kissed him in a bar, not a heartbroken ex-wife. An asset. Maybe that was better. "Fine," Paige said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll take the position." He nodded as if her answer had never been in doubt. "HR will send you the updated contract and compensation package by the end of the day. Your desk will be moved this afternoon. Be in at 9 sharp tomorrow. We have work to do." "Work?" she echoed, bracing herself. He walked back to the window, hands sliding into his pockets. "You didn't think I promoted you for fun, did you?" He glanced over his shoulder. "Your first task as my liaison, Ms. Blake, will be to redesign the corporate identity of Harrington Media Group." Her jaw dropped. "Redesign? Your entire brand?" "Yes." His eyes met hers, cool and unwavering. The logo, the visual language, the digital presence, all of it. "That's enormous," she said. "Projects like that take months. Teams, research." "You'll have both," he said. "Eventually. For now, I want to see your vision. 3 preliminary concepts. On my desk by Friday at 9. "Friday?" she repeated. "That's 4 days. 4.5, he corrected. "Don't be dramatic." Her head spun. "That's impossible." "Impossible is just a word people use when they don't want to try. Close the door on your way out, Ms. Blake." She stared at him for another heartbeat, anger and adrenaline warring in her chest, then turned toward the door. "Oh, and Ms. Blake," he added. She paused, hand on the handle. "In future," he said, "if you intend to use me as a weapon, I expect to be informed beforehand." A flush climbed up her neck. "Don't worry," she said tightly. "I don't plan on kissing my boss again." His smile was almost imperceptible. "We'll see." Paige stepped out into the hallway, the door closing with a soft but final click behind her. Her life had just been turned inside out by one reckless kiss, and the week from hell had only just begun. By Tuesday morning, Paige's old life existed only as a memory 2 floors down. Her new desk sat in the anteroom directly outside Christopher Harrington's office, a sleek white island flanked by glass walls and silence. The designers below buzzed with chatter and music. Up here, the loudest sound was the soft whoosh of the elevator doors. She could feel eyes on her whenever someone from the executive team passed through. Some looked curious, some skeptical. 1 or 2 were openly hostile. Word had traveled fast. The junior designer Everett had barely known now had a direct line to the billionaire. Leo had texted her a stream of knife and fire emojis. Lily had demanded live updates. Paige, for now, just tried to keep breathing. By 11, Christopher had only emerged once, moving past her with a clipped, "Ms. Blake, my office," like they'd been working together for years. Inside, his office was a controlled storm of activity. Calls, emails, video conferences that began and ended with alarming speed. In the middle of it all, he seemed oddly calm, focused. She presented a mood board and a few very rough sketches. He barely glanced at them before saying, "These are fine as starting points. I want you to dig deeper. Harrington Media is not a coffee brand. Think power, legacy, disruption. You have 48 hours." 48 hours. For the kind of strategic thinking that usually required weeks. She worked until midnight that night, alone on the executive floor, the hum of the HVAC system her only company. At some point Christopher left. She heard his office door open, his voice murmuring something into his phone, then the soft ding of the private elevator. He didn't say goodnight. Wednesday was worse. Every time she thought she'd landed on an idea with real substance, she'd find a dozen reasons it was derivative, too safe, too loud. She survived on coffee and adrenaline, her eyes burning, her hand cramped from sketching and scribbling notes. By Thursday evening she had 3 distinct concepts: an evolution of the existing logo, sharper and more modern, a bold, disruptive emblem that broke every rule of corporate identity she'd ever been taught. A minimalist concept, clean lines, negative space, subtle but powerful. She pinned them onto a large foam board she'd commandeered from downstairs, labeled each concept, rearranged them, and rearranged them again. It was almost midnight when she slid the board into Christopher's office. He was still there. The suit jacket was gone, sleeves rolled up. The top button of his shirt was undone, his tie loosened. He stood behind his desk, lit by the cool glow of his monitor, reading a contract with that same intense focus he turned on everything. He glanced up as she entered. For a heartbeat, the exhaustion in his face softened into something else when he saw her, something she refused to name. "You're still here," he observed. "You said Friday at 9, she replied. "I'm not planning to drop the concepts on your desk at 8:59. She set the board against a clean section of wall and stepped back, suddenly self-conscious. "Walk me through them," he said, joining her. She swallowed and started with the evolutionary concept, streamlined typography, subtle adjustments to the existing symbol. "This respects the brand equity you've already built," she said. "It signals modernization without erasing recognition." He studied it for a moment, then moved on. The second was loud and dynamic, all sharp angles and bold color. "This one breaks away entirely," she said. "New emblem, more aggressive palette. It positions Harrington as a disruptor instead of an established institution." He hummed, non-committal. Then he stopped in front of the third design. A simple monogram, 2 stylized initials intertwined, balanced over a muted, sophisticated wordmark. Negative space did half the work. The logo would look just as strong stamped tiny on a business card as it would illuminated on the side of a skyscraper. "This one," he said immediately. "Explain it." "It's restraint," she said, feeling oddly shy. "You already have power. Shouting about it is redundant. This says you're confident enough not to scream. It's timeless. The geometry lets you play with animation digitally without clutter. He studied it longer than the others. The emblem is strong, he said at last. The typography is not. Her spine stiffened. I disagree. He turned to her, brow lifting. Do you? Yes, she said, heat rising in her cheeks. The sans serif choice is deliberate. It's approachable, modern. It suggests transparency and adaptability, which your media group desperately needs if you don't want to look like a dinosaur in 10 years. A more authoritative serif would command respect, he countered. This looks soft. Soft is not always a weakness, she said, more sharply than she intended. You're talking about signaling dominance. I'm talking about longevity. People don't trust monoliths anymore. They trust brands that feel human. His jaw tightened slightly. Are you implying my judgment lacks nuance, Miss Blake? She met his gaze head on. I'm implying your suggestion is safe. Silence snapped between them like a live wire. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. He took a single step closer, closing the distance between them. Safe, he repeated quietly. You think I built this by being safe? I think, she said, pulse pounding, that you say you want passion and boldness, but the second you see it, you try to control it. Box it, so it doesn't unsettle the system you understand. Careful, he murmured. Or what? She shot back. You'll demote me back to the 12th floor because I won't let you water down your own brand? She expected him to snap, to ice over, to remind her exactly how replaceable she was. Instead, something almost like fascination appeared in his gaze. He stepped closer, then closer again. Paige's breath hitched. They were close enough now that she could see the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, the tiny scar at his hairline, the way a single strand of hair had fallen out of place over his forehead. Do you always speak to your superiors this way? He asked softly. Only when they're wrong, she whispered. His eyes dropped to her mouth. The air between them changed, charged, thick. Her skin prickled, every nerve suddenly acutely aware of how little space separated them. For one suspended heartbeat, the office, the company, the entire city beyond the glass disappeared. There was only his breath fanning her cheek, the faint scent of his cologne, clean and dark, the memory of his lips at that bar. He leaned in. Her heart thudded so hard she thought he might hear it. Her gaze dropped involuntarily to his mouth, then darted back up again. His hand lifted, hovering near her waist, not touching, just there, a promise he hadn't made. This time she wasn't angry. This time, if their mouths met, it wouldn't be about revenge or power. It would be about something far more dangerous. At the last possible second, he stopped. A muscle jumped in his jaw. He stepped back as though the distance cost him. The deadline is 9 a.m., he said, voice rougher than before. Bring me finalized typography options by then. We'll present to the executive board next week. The spell shattered. Paige swallowed, throat suddenly dry. Yes, Mr. Harrington. He turned away, back to his desk, shoulders just a little too tight. She stood there for a moment, trying to convince her knees to work again. On her way out, she paused at the door. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I'm not trying to fight you. I'm trying to do what you hired me to do, to give you the best possible work, even if that means telling you no sometimes. He didn't look up from his screen. I'm aware, he said. Go home, Miss Blake. She stepped back into the anteroom, shutting the door softly behind her. Her lips still tingled with the ghost of a kiss that hadn't happened. Her work, however, was very, very real, and by Friday morning the entire company would know exactly how entangled her fate was with the man on the other side of that door. The board meeting went better than anyone expected. The executive directors, grey hair, sharp suits, varying degrees of skepticism, studied the screen as Paige presented the new Harrington Media logo system. Her palms were damp, but her voice held steady. She walked them through the rationale. symbolism, scalability, consumer perception, future-proofing. When she finished, the room was silent. Then one of the oldest directors, a woman with steel in her spine and diamonds on her fingers, nodded once. "It's strong," she said. "Modern. We needed this." The others gradually echoed their agreement. There were questions, tweaks, minor suggestions, but ultimately the new brand system was approved. After the meeting, as people filed out, Christopher stopped beside her. "Well done, Ms. Blake," he said. "You'll oversee rollout. Global." Her heart leapt. "Thank you." He didn't smile exactly, but his gaze held something warm. "Try to look surprised when the design blogs start calling," he added quietly, "even if you're not." As it turned out, she was surprised. Within a month, industry articles were indeed buzzing about the sleek, confident rebrand of Harrington Media Group. Her name was mentioned in more than one piece. Invitations to speak at conferences trickled into her inbox. Recruiters reached out. For the first time since her divorce, Paige felt like she wasn't just surviving. She was building something of her own. That fragile sense of stability lasted exactly 6 weeks. It ended on a Thursday afternoon in the echoing marble lobby of Harrington Media Tower. Paige was at her desk upstairs, finalizing a presentation, when her phone flashed with an internal message from the lobby receptionist. "Security issue. A man is demanding to see you. Very agitated." Her stomach dropped. She didn't need a name. She was already moving to the glass railing when she heard the voice rise from below. "I said I'm here to see Paige Blake." Charles's tone cut through the space like a knife. "She'll see me. We were married, for God's sake." Heads turned. Employees slowed, pretending to check their phones while openly listening. At the front desk, the receptionist kept her expression politely neutral. "Sir, as I explained, Ms. Blake is on a different floor and currently in a meeting. If you'd like to schedule her—" "I don't need an appointment," he snapped. "It's amazing how fast some women climb the ladder once they start sleeping with the boss, isn't it?" The words rang out, bouncing off glass and stone. Heat slammed into Paige's face. Her stomach lurched, as if she'd taken a physical blow. She gripped the railing until her knuckles whitened. People in the lobby looked up, eyes darting between Charles and the security guards approaching from both sides. Elevator conversations cut off mid-sentence. Every pair of ears tuned in. "I'm going down there," Paige said, turning toward the elevator. The door to Christopher's office opened behind her. "Stay exactly where you are," he said. She froze. He'd apparently been listening to the same scene through the building's security system, or the lobby's call to his office. His expression was colder than she'd ever seen it. Fury hummed off him, contained but potent. "Mr. Harrington, I can handle this," she tried. "This is not yours to handle," he said, each word edged in ice. "It's mine." He didn't take the elevator. He took the stairs. From her vantage point at the railing, Paige watched him descend the sweeping staircase that curved from the executive floor to the lobby. The movement drew every eye in the building. Charles had always been the most confident man in any room. Till now. Christopher stepped onto the marble floor with the unhurried stride of a man who knew exactly how much power he held. He crossed the lobby without raising his voice, without any outward sign of emotion beyond the razor-sharp focus in his eyes. The security guard stepped aside, almost instinctively, as he stopped directly in front of Charles. "You must be Mr. Davies," Christopher said, voice cool. Charles straightened, attempting to reclaim some of his earlier bravado. "That's right," he said. "And you must be the billionaire who thinks he can buy whoever he—" "I don't care who you are," Christopher cut in so softly it was almost gentle. "What I care about is that you are currently trespassing on private property and harassing one of my employees." "I came to talk to my ex-wife," Charles snapped, emphasizing the word like a weapon, "who, as far as I can tell, got her shiny new title by—" "If you finish that sentence," Christopher said, "you'll be receiving a defamation suit along with your trespass notice." Charles blinked. "Are you threatening me?" "I am promising you," Christopher said. "Miss Blake is in this building because she is the most gifted designer I've had the privilege of working with. The success of our rebrand is due entirely to her vision and execution. Your insinuations are both factually incorrect and legally actionable." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly. A ripple of whispers ran through the lobby. Christopher took a small step closer. Charles flinched, almost imperceptibly. "Here are your options, Mr. Davies," Christopher continued, tone still calm. "You will leave this building immediately under security escort. You will not contact Miss Blake again. You will not speak about her or about myself in any public or professional setting in a defamatory manner." "And if I do?" Charles said, but his voice lacked conviction now. "Then the full legal and financial resources of Harrington Media Group will be directed at dismantling your career, your reputation, and your bank accounts with surgical precision," Christopher said. "You will spend the next decade wishing you had never heard the name Paige Blake. Am I clear?" The silence that followed was absolute. Charles swallowed. Color leached from his face. "Crystal." "Good," Christopher said. He turned his head slightly. "Gentlemen?" Two security guards stepped in, each taking one of Charles's arms, not roughly but firmly. They marched him toward the revolving doors. The glass spun, then he was gone. Christopher watched him leave, then lifted his gaze. It found Paige immediately. From her place at the railing she felt the full weight of that look. The lethal anger in his expression softened, not much, but enough for her to see something else flicker through. Concern. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual composed mask. His voice, when it reached her, was just loud enough for her to catch. "Are you all right?" She swallowed past the tightness in her throat and nodded. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod back, then turned away, heading not for the elevators, but back up the staircase, step by measured step. As soon as the lobby's noise rose again, Lily's message pinged her phone. "Did he just threaten to end your ex's entire lineage on live office TV?" Paige stared at the screen, a laugh bubble fighting through the leftover adrenaline. Her hands were still shaking. He hadn't humiliated her. He hadn't scolded her or told the lobby that this was all her fault. He'd stood between her and the man who'd broken her and made it devastatingly clear to everyone in earshot where he believed the value lay. For the first time since she'd met Christopher Harrington, Paige realized he wasn't just capable of wielding his power as a weapon. He could also use it as a shield. The fallout from the lobby incident was immediate. For about 2 days, whispers followed Paige everywhere she went on the executive floor. But the whispers were different now, curious, chastened, tinged with cautious respect. Whatever rumors had been circulating about her promotion were drowned out by the image of the CEO publicly defending her talent and threatening to annihilate anyone who smeared it. Then, like all office gossip, the noise shifted to a new topic. A podcast acquisition, a scandal at a rival firm. The world moved on. Except between Paige and Christopher, something had undeniably changed. He was still demanding, if anything more so. He expected flawless work under impossible deadlines. He hated excuses. If she disappointed him, his criticism was sharp but always precise, focused on the work, never on her. But there were moments, tiny fractures in his armor, the way his gaze lingered on her a second longer than necessary, the way his voice softened when he asked if she'd eaten, if she'd gone home at a reasonable hour, the way his jaw clenched whenever someone else monopolized her time in meetings. Their dynamic, once a tense balancing act between fear and defiance, had shifted into something crackling and unspoken. The tension snapped tighter one Tuesday afternoon. Paige sat at her desk, eyes crossing slightly as she scrolled through a mountain of emails when Christopher's voice cut across the quiet. "Pack a bag," he said, striding out of his office. She blinked. I'm sorry. We're going to Milan," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "There's a design exposition. I need you there. Our flight leaves in 3 hours. Her brain did a brief somersault. Milan as in Italy. Milan? No, Milan, Wisconsin, he replied dryly. Yes, Italy. Is there a problem? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I don't have anything packed. I need to arrange coverage for my projects. Inform. You have 3 hours, he said. You're resourceful. I'll see you at Teterboro. Details are in your email. He turned back toward his office. Christopher? She called before she could stop herself. He paused, looked over his shoulder. You can say please, you know, she said. He walked back to her desk, bracing one hand casually on the edge. Ms. Blake, he said, eyes glinting, if I asked you to come to Milan and said please, would your answer be any different? She considered that. Probably not. Then let's not waste time, he said. She huffed out a reluctant laugh. Fine, I'll see you there. 3 hours later, she was racing across the tarmac at Teterboro Airport toward a sleek private jet, carry-on bag bumping against her leg, hair whipped back by the wind. An attendant greeted her with a warm smile. Ms. Blake? Welcome. Mr. Harrington is already on board. Of course he was. Inside, the plane was less jet and more luxury apartment with wings. Soft leather seats, wood paneling, a couch along one side. Christopher sat near a small conference table, laptop open, sleeves rolled up, reading something on the screen with that same intense focus. He looked up as she approached. You made it, he said. You sound surprised, she replied, sliding into the seat opposite him. I'm not, he said. You don't strike me as the type to turn down an opportunity because it's inconvenient. The attendant closed the door. Moments later, the plane began to taxi. So, Page said, trying to act like private jets were totally normal. Milan, Design Exposition. Is this a scouting mission or a PR stunt? Both, he said. I want to see what the cutting-edge agencies are doing, who's leading conversations in visual identity. And Harrington's sponsorship requires us to be seen. Us, she repeated. Yes, he said. Try not to look terrified when people ask you questions. You're representing the future of our brand. No pressure, she muttered. He glanced at her, amusement softening his features. If you're looking for a job with less pressure, I hear coffee shops are hiring. Don't tempt me, she said. Over the Atlantic, something like a truce settled over them. They reviewed speakers, circled booths on the expo floor map, argued about whether minimalist design was reaching a saturation point. He asked her thoughts, actually listened to the answers, challenged her when he disagreed. No tests, no traps, just two people who loved the same craft, sparring about it. Milan was a fever dream. By day, the design exposition was a riot of color and concept. Holographic installations, interactive brand experiences, fonts that danced when you walked past them. They walked the floor together, picking apart what worked and what didn't. By night, the city turned into something else entirely. They ate pasta in a tiny trattoria where the tablecloths didn't match, and the owner greeted Christopher like an old friend. They walked through the Brera district, past street musicians and open windows spilling laughter and the smell of garlic into the night. Every so often, Page would catch his profile in the glow of a street lamp, strong jaw, focused gaze, surrounded by old stone buildings and a sky full of stars, and have to remind herself, that's my boss. Not the romantic lead in a movie, my boss. On their last night, the hotel upgraded them to a suite with a shared living room and a balcony overlooking the Duomo, one of those views that made you believe in God, or at least in architecture. After a marathon day of panels and meetings, they stepped onto the balcony with 2 glasses of Italian red. A successful trip, Christopher said, leaning his forearms on the railing. I'll admit, Page said, this beats the Onyx bar. He glanced at her, eyes catching the last of the sunset. You're finally not glaring at me. I'll mark that as a win. She smiled despite herself. You haven't called my work unacceptable in at least 48 hours. I'm practically euphoric. They stood in silence for a while, watching the city glow. The Duomo's spires reached into the darkening sky, lit from below, intricate and stubbornly beautiful. "Paige," he said quietly. Something in his tone made her straighten. "Yes?" He didn't look at her at first. "There's something I've wanted to ask you since the night we met." She swallowed. "At the bar." "At the bar," he confirmed. He turned then, leaning his hip against the railing, facing her. "Why me?" She blinked. "You know the answer," she said, trying to make light of it. "You looked expensive." "Try again," he said. She sighed, eyes drifting back to the cathedral. The memory felt simultaneously crystal clear and a lifetime away. "I'd just seen him with her," she said softly. "My ex-husband, the woman he cheated with. He looked so proud of himself, like throwing away 3 years of my life made him more interesting." She swallowed. "I felt small, invisible, powerless." The word hung between them. "I looked around that bar," she continued, "and you didn't look like you were trying to impress anyone. You didn't need to. You looked like the most untouchable man in the room, strong, controlled. So I thought if I kissed you, it would shatter his illusion. Remind him he wasn't the only one who could be exciting." She laughed weakly. It was crazy, but in that moment it felt like the only thing I could control.